Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Where Did All the Leaders Go? Today's Leadership Bench Strength Challenge. My name is Karen Luce. I'm in charge of Learning and Development here at Denison Consulting, and I'm your facilitator for today's webinar. We're very excited to have Jean Hauser, Distinguished Executive Level Coach and Researcher, to kick off the first of 3 leadership-focused webinars for April, May, and June. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a couple of things with you. Jean will present today for about 40 minutes, and then we'll use the remainder of our time to answer some questions sent in by our audience. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see your control panel that you can use to send in your questions. We ask that you please send in your questions throughout the presentation rather than waiting for the end. This gives us enough time to organize and make the most of our question and answer session. We will try to get through as many of the questions as we can, and we do apologize if we can't get to your specific question. We'll make every effort to follow up with you after the webinar. I also wanted to let everyone know that a copy of the slides and a copy of the executive summary of the research that we're presenting today will be available for you after the webinar. We'll email that to everyone once it is available. And now I'd like to introduce to you our guest for today. We're sorry to say that Dr. Eileen Antonucci will not be able to join us today. She had some unforeseen circumstances come up. But we are, however, honored to have Dr. Jean Hauser. She has over 25 years of experience in executive and organizational development. Jean was the director of the Center for Custom Programs at the University of North Carolina. She also served as the Assistant Dean for Executive Education at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. After her successful academic career, Jean served as the Senior Vice President for the Concourse Group, an international consulting firm. She has been involved in many research projects and team-building initiatives with organizations and leaders, including the study that we're discussing today. She's had a long relationship with Denison, and we're so happy to have her here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jean.
Karen, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here in Ann Arbor this morning and have a chance to talk with all of you about some research that really interests me. And I'm sorry Eileen can't be here today because she certainly was the lead principal investigator. You see on your screen kind of the hypothesis of this research. Due to severe shortages in top talent, we will not be growing as quickly as we planned. We will not be as innovative as we were in the past or as productive. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause to our customers or investors. Well, you know, you hear that, and we heard that from our clients, and so we tried to answer the question, you know, is that true? And I think most research is based on good hunches. Was this really a problem? Was it impacting American companies in terms of their growth, their productivity, their innovation? So we thought the only thing that we could, in good conscience, do is to do a study. And you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen some of the companies that participated, all rather large, well-known companies, sophisticated, one would think, in talent management. So we began to talk with these companies, and we surveyed them, and to our surprise, the number was high. About 70% of those companies said they are experiencing moderate to major leadership shortages. So if that's true, did we think that those leadership shortages were going have become a real problem? Were they likely to go away soon? And the number goes up to 82% that are expecting the shortages in the future. And what we heard in these conversations, these interviews that we did, some of the research was interviews and some of it was a web survey. People talked about, you know, the 35 to 45-year-olds, weren't as many of those people, the baby boomers. We don't know the impact of their retirement, and certainly with the present-day recession, we're not sure if some of those people have stayed in the workforce and perhaps are blocking younger people from moving up in the organizations, which is frustrating. And almost everybody talked about, these are large companies, talked about their international component. As you look at China, India, Brazil, those economies are growing faster than the U.S. economy, and you need people from those countries who understand Western culture to work with Western companies, and you need people on the ground in those countries who understand those particular cultures. So there's a lot of competition, evidently, for a small group of talent. Is the impact real, this lack of talent? And in our discussions in these interviews, 63% of the companies were beginning to say that there is a great impact. Inhibiting growth in the sense that without a lack of talent, it's hard to expand into new markets. It's hard to make acquisitions. You make acquisitions and you have to have people on both sides of that acquisition to make it work. And as most of you know, the research around the success of acquisitions is not horribly good. So a lack of leadership means that there are investment opportunities that aren't being pursued. One of the big costs of lack of good talent management is the cost of recruitment on the outside, which really can be in the millions of dollars. If you're not growing your people internally and you have to go to the outside, recruitment is terribly expensive at the high levels. So a question we ask people is, what is the problem costing you? This lack of talent. And since what senior executives do is make good decisions or bad decisions, the cost of the problem is really hard to, and in a sense, it's really hard to equate. I was talking to an executive who said, one of our major divisions is headed up by the wrong person. We put that person in because it was the only person, kind of the shotgun promotion. And I said, well, what's the problem costing you? And he just shook his head and he said, millions. What's causing the current talent shortages? And we call this kind of the perfect storm, a combination of forces all coming together at the same time to create really a serious talent crisis. And certainly the number one cause, according to the people that we interview, the companies, is skills. Just finding the people who have the skills needed to compete in today's environment. The hot markets we talked about, China, India, Brazil, having people who have international capabilities, and the lack of investment in talent in recent years, and certainly since the recession. I'm sure a lot of you in your companies, or if you're consultants with your clients, you have seen that people are stepping back from investing in talent management. And then, of course, the whole demographic shift has an impact as well. What's causing the current talent shortages? Skills, as I said before, are certainly a huge issue, but it's not just a numbers issue. The increased globalization is a big problem, as I said before, as organizations acquire, or they are looking to have people who can manage a very complex company with a lot of different kinds of products and services, where in this environment we need to get costs down, quality up, really be able to see around corners and have executives who can do that, and executives who really understand the power of innovation for what's going to happen next. There's pressure for higher levels of performance. We need leaders who not only can prove their own performance, but also their team performance year in, year out. If there's some of you in the group out there who read that wonderful old classic In Search of Excellence, very, very few of those companies are still regarded as the excellent companies, because in a sense it's not hard to be good for a while. High performance, people reach that. The challenge that we have now today is how to have sustainably high performance without burning people out year in, year out. It's a fantastic challenge in a world of really relentless change. We need leaders who can manage in relentless change, and we need leaders who can inspire confidence not only within their organizations, but with their boards and their stockholders. If you took a look at CNN this morning, you probably got a good dose of what's going on in Washington with Goldman Sachs. The head of Bank of America stops down. Wall Street versus Main Street is a constant drumbeat in our society today. Our leaders in Washington are certainly under a lot of criticism. We have something called the Tea Party revolt. So in the fabric of the nation, and I think in the world, there's really a crisis in leadership that is deep and real. One of the things also that exacerbates this skills issue is that although a lot of our high potential leaders have bachelor's or master's degrees, even doctorate degrees, there is a half-life to education that simply takes place as the world gets more complex and as business becomes more difficult. There's also an employee expectation that people talked about in terms of kind of the 35 to 45-year-olds. Very often in those households, we have we have a marriage with two careers going hard, and so some people are opting out of these pressure roles. They really don't want to take on a high-pressure role. They don't want to travel. They don't want to work the long hours that it may take to be one of these relentless leaders of change. And many people, I mean, look at Google, look at Apple, are attracted to what I would call non-traditional office environments. And so there's a lot of challenges for major corporations to get the best talent. In our interviews with companies who seem to be doing better, the study found that the more companies practice some fundamental principles, the less talent shortages they had. So there really was a correlation, and I would ask you to pay special attention to this particular slide, because I think you can use it as an audit tool. Ask yourself, are we, are my clients, or are we as a company doing the kinds of things that are key to success if you are going to have fewer talent shortages? And here's what we found, that if there must be, if you're going to have a major impact on talent shortages, we found the companies where there was an executive commitment, where senior executives spend time, money, they model, they hold the organization accountable for developing talent. That is very key to success. Also, the talent management system is very closely aligned to the business strategy. The people that you have in place today may be able to execute on the strategy of today, but what about tomorrow? The company that you're about to become. And I think a lot of companies find themselves in that situation, that they're good today, but they're not going to be great tomorrow in terms of talent. And is there a hip-to-hip relationship between HR and the line? Too often, as we all know, HR is trying to solve a problem that the business hasn't bought into. So there has to be great alignment there. And then certainly IT has an impact. If your talent management system is going to be integrated, it needs to be seamless, it needs to be visible, transparent. People have to know what it is that the organization is looking for and how they fit into that. And then high level of employee engagement. Good talent management systems motivates people, energizes and rewards them, helps retain top performers. People need to keep track of their top performers and seeing if they're, to what extent those people have chosen other organization. What was the exit in your organization look like when people were hitting the door? Who are those people? I know some companies told us that when they went through a downsizing and they offered a package, the wrong people took it, and they lost a lot of good talent. Great companies like J&J use their Credo survey. Many companies today are surveying the culture and employee satisfaction. One of the things that I look for in the companies I work with is not only have they identified and focused on the high potential people, but is there an individual development plan or an action plan in place that's being monitored, that is where people are being held accountable? Because measurement, accountability of talent strategies for values and results is absolutely key. And then we also found that those employers that have a very big positive brand, people love to work there. Like in my own home state of North Carolina, SAS certainly always comes out very high in best places to work, Disney, JetBlue, NASA, where the culture is strong and the culture is, employees heavily identify with being a part of that culture. You have to remember that no executive is developed in isolation. That executive needs a robust and integrated talent management system to be as much as he or she can be. These next 6 slides that we're going to look at really quickly show the correlation between those companies who are kind of following these best practices you saw on the previous page, on page 9, against those that are not. And we call the top group are those practicing the fundamental principles of integrated talent management versus the bottom group where they can't or are unable to do that. And it's really striking. Do they have current leadership shortages is a great question. And in the bottom group, 30% of those companies said, yeah, we've got current shortages. And where the top companies said only 4% they have leadership shortages. And the same is true on the next slide. What do you project into the future? And this, I think, is kind of an interesting slide because in the bottom group, 90% of the people think they're going to have future shortages, where in the top group, only 65% think they are going to have future shortages. But it's also interesting, in the top group, they're more in touch with the future. They say 17% of those companies says, we don't know. The future's uncertain. So we can't tell you for sure. But we think we're in pretty good shape, but we don't know. Where I think in the bottom group, there's a certainty that's probably unwarranted. Next question we ask is, do your senior executives spend time on talent management? And again, you see the same kinds of results where the 45% of the bottom group spend less than 5% of their time on talent management. I'm going to cite from our research, Bell Canada, for example, has a group of attributes they call the leadership edge attributes. And in your performance measurement, 50% of your score comes out of how well you deliver on these leadership attributes, which are things like listening, acting fast, taking accountability, having a passion for results. So, people do what they're rewarded to do. So making people accountable in terms of bonus and so on is highly effective. And this slide is what is working now. Our executives modeling the talent management goals, and again you see some very similar results with the top group versus the bottom group. And automation does play a role, and you see that the top group is significantly more automated, between somewhat automated to moderately automated, giving people the transparency and the knowledge they need to kind of track where they are in terms of the organization compared with the bottom group. And this is a key indicator. Do you have successors? Are there people in the pipeline? Are you going to have the right person for the right job at the right moment? And the study found that the top group reports close to 2 successors per key position, while the bottom group has less than 1. So if you look at all the companies that we talked to, and the 100 companies or so that answered the survey or were interviewed in more depth, and you look at this, you see there's only one. My senior management team is involved and committed to building strength. That's the only thing that's in the green. Everything else is in the yellow until you get back to the bottom, down to the bottom item, which is in the red zone. We always have the right talent in the right place at the right time. So this is not a great picture. The average score for companies are simply not high enough. If we throw all the companies in together, this is a fairly discouraging report card. But if you look at the top group, the companies who are practicing these key success factors that we saw back on page 9, the news is much better. The top 5 are in the green zone, which is where we want to be. The next 5 are in the yellow zone, and there's nothing in the red zone. So using the best practices, being focused, delivering, holding the organization accountable is highly effective. Is the business ready for solutions? Are businesses ready for solutions? Is your business out there? Have you taken a close look at this? Have you done an audit about talent management? Have you thought about, is it integrated? One of the things that Eileen and I talked about was, and kind of the model we talked to people about when we interviewed them was, if you looked on a continuum from the time that you attract and hire talent until that talent leaves you for whatever reason, how is that talent managed through the continuum? And what we found in talking to people is there's kind of one group of people who do recruiting and bring people into the organization. It's unclear in many organizations what happens after that, if there's onboarding, if there is some sort of a program to onboard those people or to orient those people to the organization. What kind of performance appraisal do they get, and is that performance appraisal attached to an individual development plan that involves feedback? Then are they hooked to succession planning? And what we find is, because boards are interested in succession planning, the CEOs and boards are very worried, extremely concerned. We usually have the board and the CEO involved at the succession planning process at the top of the company, but it's usually unclear whether that whole process is visible and integrated and people can see from day one what their path is. So we've got shortages, as we said before, particularly in acute and in the global environment. Businesses are making this a top priority. All the way back to 2004, the conference board said that more than 500 CEOs ranked availability of talent executives among their top 10 challenges. Building bench strength is now the number one business goal for most businesses. A lot of people would argue, and I'm kind of one of them, that one of the biggest jobs for the future for the CEO and for the board is to be concerned about who's going to be running this company 5 years from now. What else will it take to address the issue, to get these integrated talent management processes in place? Well, certainly there has to be a talent management strategy. It has to be more customized, better aligned with the strategy of the company. Much more forward-looking. I say to people, you know, if it were 5 years from now and we could phone home from the future, if I could, like Scotty on Star Trek, if I could beam you down into the future and you could phone home from the future, what's the world going to look like out there? I mean, try to think back 5 years in terms of what Google was doing and what Apple was doing, and what's happening with the internet now and integrated technology around the world. It's hard to read the future, but I would argue that that's one, you know, what's next is the major question that your senior leadership needs to ask. Hiring, onboarding, evaluating, that whole value chain has to be integrated. And, you know, we need to be more innovative. I would argue that innovation is really the key to success for the companies of tomorrow. And if you don't have innovation in your organization, it's very, very hard then to create growth, and very, very hard to be a top competitor in a global environment. I would argue that whoever innovates quickest may win in the world of tomorrow, and the competitive outlook is going to be very aggressive. we talked to our companies in this research study, some hundreds of them, and asked them, what are you doing to kind of stay ahead of the curve? We didn't talk, this was kind of a question that we asked the top group. And what we heard from them was, an increased use of 360s, both in the full and pulse form to drive developmental action plans. A lot of you, I use the Denison Leadership Survey and the Culture Survey. Some companies have surveys of their own, but we absolutely have to have unvarnished feedback so that we can develop action plans that are really at the heart of moving people forward, and there has to be high accountability. It can't be just a box that people are checking. Everybody today has some limited resources, so it's very, very important that resources be focused on the critical positions versus trying to paint with a much broader brush. So, what are those positions that are absolutely critical to the strategy? The people that we're going to have to deliver tomorrow. In many organizations now, this is becoming such an issue. They're actually identifying a chief talent officer or a chief learning officer to manage this process. They're also looking for ways to identify throwing the net wider, letting people work on task forces, letting people do special assignments so that we can begin to be on the hunt for high potential people in places where we weren't necessarily looking before. Those hidden high potential people lower in the organization. And identify those people earlier and accelerate their growth. Let them know that their performance is being monitored and that good performance is being rewarded. Retention of high potential people is key. If you're losing your high potential people to other organizations, you're starting over again. One of the unhappiest events in any organization's life is to identify high potential people, grow those people, and then see them leave the organization. And the focus has to be on integrated talent management systems that are quite transparent, where people can see where they fit, and increase attention to onboarding so that people get off in the organization on the right foot, being able to see the path, forward based on performance. And a lot of leader-led programs where the CEO and his executive group are the first people to get involved, for example, in a culture study or an individual development plan. I'm working with the company right now, and the CEO said to me, we're going to have talent management in this company, and we're going to start with me. At the beginning of the year, I saw some research that can kind of add to the perfect storm. And so after everything we've said about talent, high potential talent shortages, what is the conference board showing in their research? And I think there's certainly a relationship between these two studies. Sadly, only 45% of Americans, according to the conference board, only 45% of Americans are satisfied with their actual work. And that's the lowest level recorded in 22 years of studying the issue, down from 61% in 1987 of people who said they were happy in their jobs. So today, people went to work this morning, and only less than half of them are happy with what they found when they got there. Well, why is it? Well, recession certainly is partly to blame. These are difficult times by any standards. But the trends are, it's not just the recession. Job dissatisfaction in the country has been declining for 20 years. That's a sobering thought. Fewer workers consider their jobs interesting. So if only 51% of them think they have interesting jobs, how motivated are those people? And how likely are they to carry the torch for your organization into a possible future? And that's all any of us have. It's not guaranteed. The future is only possible. So 50%, 51% of people think their job's interesting. What does that mean? Incomes have not kept up with inflation, and there are certainly blogs now who track CEO salaries, which have soared. And people can go on the blogs and they pick up their annual reports, and they can see that the senior executives of the companies are making a lot more money. They're not keeping up with inflation. They're not happy. Wall Street is paying out terrific bonuses. So there's a lot of disconnect between what's going on with me and what's going on with my senior management, and add to that the high cost of health care, which is certainly eaten into take-home pay, and the workplace is less than satisfying. One of the things that I worry about and talk with my clients about is they all love to show you the figures, which are encouraging, about how organizations are doing cost containment, increasing efficiencies, which is all really another word for cost cutting, very deep cost cutting. A lot of it in people. You know, people are something you can't put on your balance sheet. You can put a new truck on your balance sheet, or a building on your balance sheet, or a server on your balance sheet, and all of those things are enablers to your strategy, but the actual execution of strategy is going to be through people. So the question is, as we do a lot of cost cutting and we are letting groups go, who's going to do that work? Are those people critical to our future? And maybe more importantly, are people beginning to think of themselves as free agents, especially in your younger workforce, so that they will reward what they may see as unloyal corporations with very little loyalty themselves. If downsizing undermines morale and optimism and satisfaction in the workplace, I think when this economy improves, as it most surely will, that we may find a generation of free agents who will be out looking for different kinds of companies to work for than the ones that they're working for now. The research has been quite clear for years that people change jobs not because of money. Money is usually not the crucial issue. They change jobs because they want to feel important, they want to do work that makes them happy, and they want to be inside organizations that make them proud. It's a highly competitive environment. So where are these talented, high potential free agents going to end up? Only 51%, Conference Board says, people find their job interesting, compared to 70% only back in 1987. Expectations have shifted and changed. The workforce is different. But workers who do find their jobs interesting are much more likely to be innovative, which is at the very, very core of getting to a possible future. They're more likely to take calculated risks. They use initiative to drive productivity and economic growth. So innovation drives productivity, which drives economic growth. And China and India and Brazil all have a more robust economic growth this morning than the United States. So these are sobering ideas. Lynn Franco, who's director of Conference Board's Consumer Research Center, says, and it's a good way to end this part of our discussion today, what's really disturbing about growing job dissatisfaction is the way it can play into the competitive nature of the United States workforce down the road, and on the growth of our economy, all in a negative way. When I was at Duke some years ago, we had a large foreign student population in our MBA programs for all kinds of reasons, some of them economic, and some of them having to do with the difficulty of getting student visas after 9/11, more students are staying where they are. And they are helping in China or India or Brazil build their own economies. We used to enjoy kind of a brain drain where we brought people to this country in the MBA process and they stayed. So a lot of PhDs in research and development in this country from all over the world. They came, they saw, they stayed. Now a lot of those people are going back to their home countries, or they're staying in their home countries because they really understand that the quality of education that you can now get in China is quite high. I spent a month there a couple of years ago and visited universities, and I recommend that to you. If you haven't been to China or India or Brazil, I've been to 2 out of the 3, you need to go and take a look. It's amazing what's going on in the rest of the world. And I'm afraid, unfortunately, a lot of us are focused on Europe as going abroad, but there's a lot going on out there that a lot of us haven't seen firsthand. So I'm kind of going to turn it over to our question part, Karen, and kind of asking you to help me think about and help the rest of the group think about, given these realities, if you accept this research and you accept this hypothesis, how do we address the perfect storm to bring talent management solutions to your companies or to the companies with whom you work? So Karen, I hope we've had a couple of questions while I've been chatting away here.
We have had many questions come in, Jean. It's hard to know where to start with all of the good questions that our audience has sent in. One question that came in is, what do we mean when we say talent management? Can you give some specific tasks and behaviors and activities that people should be doing when they're creating their talent management programs?
Yeah, well, I'd take you back. There's a lot written on this. This isn't the only research in the world, and there are talent management associations now, and it's one of those things like when we saw the early days of total quality management. People are thinking about it, talking about it. But I think if you went back to, I think it's slide 9 in this presentation, you actually see kind of from our research, kind of a template, and I can just move us back to that house to go really quickly. You could use, if you're kind of new to this field and or you're thinking about it, what is working? This is kind of a template that you could use. This is what the best companies said that they were doing. These are the companies who have fewer talent shortages, either now or in the future. People who have, this is the group of companies who have successors in place. This is kind of a benchmark. So this would be a great, you could take the slides, slide 9, and you could say, okay, I'm going to use that as an audit. And of course, I always encourage people to go out to the companies that they admire and the companies that they think are successful. Do some benchmarking on your own. You could take slide 9 as a way to do that. Go out and ask some of the best companies, what are you doing? And see if this couldn't be a template for good benchmarking.
Great. Here's another question that's come in. Based on the research, a lot of the research from this study was based on larger companies. What are some of the key lessons that smaller organizations who may not have had the capacity to have a talent management or a learning and development department do to strengthen their efforts in this area?
For small organizations or smaller companies, this could be a particularly exacerbating problem. I've done some work with startups who were looking to get products through the FDA, and they're heavy into research and development, and they're trying to find a pattern that works, maybe do an IPO. That kind of thing. And unfortunately, the kinds of things that happen in a startup company or in a very small company, the kinds of people who could be successful there, very often have difficulty taking that company to the next level, so they can get scalability. And you very often see that the kind of people who are entrepreneurs and who can get a great invention off the ground, or who can do that initial kind of work, have difficulty in the transition. Organization, it can be just a really simple question, is we have the right people in the right positions for what we're doing today. The question is thinking about tomorrow. Can a small companies can quickly outgrow their talent base, so they're ready for that future.
Jean, we lost you a little bit in there. Can you repeat the last couple of moments?
Okay, I'm sorry.
You got me now? Yep, we've got you now.
I'm sorry. I'll just try to say it again really quickly. Is that in companies where I work, where they're highly entrepreneurial, they're highly innovative, they're trying to find a pattern that works, they're a startup company, they have a particularly difficult job, because the kind of skills that get them through the innovation stage may not take them to the next level. So as they try to get into their IPO, moving from the entrepreneurial stage to a stage of market expansion and more sustainability, the kinds of people who are in the right jobs today for that business very often aren't the right people to take that job to the next level. At Duke, we had a Center for the Study of Entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurs love entrepreneurial kinds of activities, and they may not be the kinds of people that you need to take the company to the next stage of scalability. And very often they bring in professional managers at that stage. But what every small company can be, I mean, whether you're running a bakery or you're doing a startup in high tech, you need to say, I've got the right people today in the right jobs for the business of today, but what about tomorrow?
Going back to the presentation a little bit, at one point you mentioned that there should be more focus on the onboarding process to retain your high potentials. Can you talk more about the onboarding process and why that's so important?
For those of you who haven't read it, I would recommend a book. I'm always recommending a book, but I wish I'd written this book. But a lot of you will read it and it'll be very familiar, or you're already using it, which is called The First 90 Days. And for people I work with, if I'm doing onboarding coaching with them, I have them read that book, which lays out an actual kind of blueprint for getting through that first 90 days. Onboarding is really especially important to the more senior level executive that you're bringing into your organization from the outside, and you've paid a headhunter God knows how much to bring that person on board. It's probably really important for that person to have some guidance, either an internal mentor or an external coach, so that person has a period of time where, with a process and a plan, they can learn the organization, understand something about the business, and not make some really critical mistakes early in their careers that are going to haunt them for a long time. And that's true with the middle executive as well. And for a middle or junior executive, probably getting that person an internal mentor, being sure that they know the culture, being sure they know how to navigate in the politics of that culture. And everything has politics. Families, churches, politics are not a negative, they just are a reality. So I think onboarding is an investment especially you need to make in a senior executive, or get a mentor for someone coming in, because what happens during that first 90 days, which is kind of your honeymoon period, is that you're starting to build your personal brand. And so they say, well, let me tell you about Joe, or let me tell you about Mary. That kind of elevator message that sticks with you for a long time. So whatever initial belief that people have about that executive early on usually sticks to them like a burr or like a halo. So it's very, very important that we protect, we give that person a really good start. It's part of building their high potential capability within your company.
Kind of along those same lines, do you have any advice for employees within those companies that want to be identified as a high potential and what they can do to make themselves stand out?
Great question. That's a great question, Karen. I used to love to coach the young MBAs who were out job hunting when I was at Duke, especially the women. And so they were interviewing all kinds of companies, and so I said, remember, it's a mutual interview. The company's interviewing you, you're interviewing the company, and here's 2 questions that you need to ask that company who's trying to hire you, or at least interviewing you. And the first question is, what are you and I going to do about my future? What are you and I going to do to develop me? Try to do that in such a way that you don't reflect an attitude of entitlement, but that you and I together are going to be developing my career. And if the recruiter says, oh, well, gee, I don't know, it's probably good to pick up your papers and go to the next room, to the next recruiter. The next question is, what are you and I going to do to get me an international assignment early in my career? Especially important for women who may want to get that international assignment before before they have a family or whatever. But so the 2 questions: an international assignment, and what are you and I going to do to develop my career? Now, if you're inside of a company right now and you feel like you're not part of the integrated talent management system, you need to get your hand up. Talk to your boss. Talk to HR. Make sure that even if they don't require it, that you personally are taking the responsibility for developing an individual development plan for yourself, so that you can show the organization, you can show your boss what you're doing to grow. Look to get on special projects. Understand how to promote yourself without bragging. Be visible. Work hard, long hours, all those kinds of things. But you are the CEO of your career, and you can't expect the company to kind of hand it to you on a silver platter, especially in these times.
Well, that brings us to kind of a thought question that one of our listeners has brought up. In terms of this research, in terms of the generational changes that we're seeing with the baby boomers to the Generation X to the Generation Y. I mean, in our new company, or in the companies today, we're asking people to do more with less. It's very demanding, fast-paced, very innovative. Are we just not giving our high potentials and our new leaders enough time to grow yet? We just haven't given them enough time to mature?
Well, Karen, certainly maturity, I get to say this after 25 years, right, in OD. Maturity is important. Maturity is important. And there is some very recent research that came out that said, contrary to kind of what we had been led to believe, our brains aren't deteriorating all that badly over time, and that more senior executives in fact do make better informed decisions, mainly because they've had more experience at it. They've been doing it longer. So time is certainly a factor here. But I think young people who want to accelerate their own careers, I really encourage them to look for task forces, look for chances to make decisions, look for don't play it too safe. Take some risks and be involved in the data gathering and the framing of decisions that are being made that are very, very critical to the future of the organization. build your experience as quickly as you can. Build that experience as quickly as you can. And I think that if you're kind of a magnet for gathering experience, that you will accelerate your progress through the organization. I know some very young people who are extremely good at making decisions, but they've worked at that. They've read about decision making. They have a process for doing that. They understand the value of after-action review, learning from what they've done. So I think that again, that's one of those things where an individual can accelerate their promotability, if you will. But boy, by the time these young people are out of their 30s and into their 40s, they better have a really good feel for how they're going to be important decision makers in their organizations.
That's really good advice, especially for hopefully a lot of our listeners out there. We do have a lot of consultants in our listening audience today, and as a consultant yourself, a coach yourself, what are the big takeaways, the best practices that a consultant or a coach can take away from this research and apply in their own practice? And this will be our last question for today.
What's the best they can take away from this research? I think one of the things that I try to discuss with clients before we get to the contract or whatever is how I go into business. And I think we have to be really careful that we don't sell kind of short-term solutions. I think it takes change is a process. You have to know something about change management. You have to let people pretty clearly understand the journey and that it's not going to be quick. Organizations are made up of people, and people behave because of the beliefs they hold. So a lot of what consultants are trying to do is change beliefs, and that's not going to be easy. If you believe everything's fine, you've got plenty of people, the world's going to stay pretty much the same, you got a great bench, then I probably wouldn't want to work with that organization around integrated talent management, because they don't believe they've got a problem. So one of the things that consultants have to do is kind of raise, if you will, raise the fever of an organization by giving them good feedback. And you can do that through an interview process, through Denison instruments or others. But people have to see the disconnect between where they kind of thought they were and where they actually are. And then closing that gap between where we are and where we need to be or want to be is really the challenge of all consulting. It's not an overnight process. It's not 90 days. It's a lot of clients that I've worked with, we've continued some sort of relationship over years because the world out there is changing all the time, and they need to have input and coaching from the outside, because when you're inside the organization, sometimes these things are very difficult to see, or it's not politic to see them.
Well, thank you, Jean. Thank you for that very thought-provoking presentation. You've given us a lot to all digest today. And for those of you listening out there, I'd encourage you to contact us if there's anything you're interested in following up on or learning more about Jean or the work that she's done. You can contact us here at Denison and we will get the message to her. As I mentioned, this is the first of 3 webinars that are dedicated to leadership. Next month on May 26th, we're going to take a tactical spin and look at the facilitative leader approach with Roger Schwartz. He's going to examine that process and how it can make a difference in our organizations. Then in June, we're going to look at a leader's influence on a culture in action, we're going to be joined by Cindy Stewart of the Family Health Council of Central Pennsylvania. When Cindy joined her organization, she had the proverbial donut of doom in her culture survey results, and through her innovative leadership style, she's been able to turn it around and sustain it to a high-performing organization for over 10 years now. So keep an eye out for more information on both of those, and we hope to see you all back at a future webinar soon. Once again, we really appreciate the time you've all taken today to be with us, and we look forward to having you at a future webinar. Thank you, and good morning, good evening, and good night.